Yep. Show me dragon.
Oh
Welcome
well,
to I've never read Discworld. I'm Andy.
I'm PJ.
I've been bouncing about lately. Gavin, who gave me all his Discworld books, was looking after my gerbils while I was away, and has chosen the name of one of them. Hey, Sam Vimes.
Awesome.
Popping a little bit of Vimes now.
Perfect. Yes, let's see. I can totally see. I saw the picture a few days ago. I can totally see the resemblance.
You don't like the press, do you, Sam Vimes?
It's quite fitting actually that we have our first kind of proper. Well, I suppose it's not our first proper visual look at Vimes. We've seen Vimes on a few book covers so far, but this is first time we're going to spend a bit of time in a visual medium with Vimes, and that's because this month we're taking a little bit of a segue. Andy, we're looking at what book?
We are looking at the Guards graphic novel published by Victor Glanans in 2000, adapted by Stephen Briggs and Graham Higgins illustrating, with what I spotted a little reference at the front of Pathfinder colouring by James Higgins. I've been unable to find out who James Higgins is. I did find a James Higgins who knows a Graham Higgins on Facebook, so that's maybe something I'm completely in the dark as to what find.
Oh yeah, there's a relation. Yeah, I never actually, I never really looked at this copyright page in detail, and I just did for the first time as we started the podcast, and I got a good hearty laugh out of Terry's dedication, which is so the dedications on the intro page read, Terry, to everyone who died in the making of this big comic. I don't know why that just tickles me so much, because Graham's is quite genuinely sincere. 'Cause they obviously didn't coordinate on the gag, but then I don't think Terry ever wrote an author's bio or a dedication or something like that that wasn't the gag. So we shouldn't really be too surprised by that. So raise a glass and pour one out to everyone who died in the making of this big comic.
I was
Respect.
actually watching Terry last night on a 1990s British sci-fi panel show called Space Cadets, which featured Greg Proops, Craig Charles, and
Love
Bill
Briggs.
Bailey. And there was an episode with Sylvester McCoy and Terry Pratchett on it.
That is a stacked lineup right there.
And it's I've just
Yeah.
put a link out to it on Blue Sky last night. The second half of it is particularly shining where Terry's concerned.
Awesome. Yeah, must check that out. Great. So we're very much in Andy's domain this month in terms of comics, but I am keen to revisit Guards for the podcast. I remember it's interesting. It feels weird in a way, like how much time has passed since we started doing this. When we arrived at Guards the first time round, I was so looking forward to it. It remains one of my favorite Discworlds for sure, but. I just had like a pretty big setback. I think when I got rejected for my PhD application the first time around that I was really bummed when we did that episode. And now I'm just coming to the end of my first year of actually doing my research. So like a whole year passed in between that and me reapplying for the project, and now a whole year of me actually doing the project has passed. That's how far we've come with the podcast. So that's kind of cool. So it'll be nice to revisit Guards in a slightly more positive frame of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a book I've a lot of fondness for as well. And yeah, my home medium. Um,
I think that'll be super interesting for me to gauge because I don't feel like I read comics properly. Like I don't read them in enough detail. Like I usually when I read comics, I fly through them and then I find myself having to go back and make myself like read them slowly and appreciate the art and appreciate the compositions and stuff like that. So I'll be really, really interested to hear where you think this adaptation improves on the original, where you think it maybe struggles, stuff like that. Because I'm really keen to get more kind of analytical when it comes to that sort of stuff in terms of graphic novels.
well, I made 5 pages of notes.
It's a
So
good
I mean,
start.
I'll give my overview. My overview is I really loved it. It delivered a lot of stuff. I actually have all my foibles up front. Um, But I'm really very glad of the extra page count. It's a big step up from Mort in that respect.
Yeah, it feels it's weighty. I've got, if you're on video, I've got the hard copy, one of the few hard copies that I still own. I've got it in my hand, and as trade paperbacks go, it's a weighty one. You know, it's got a bit of heft, which is appreciated to tell the story. It is 122 pages, and it's like there's no padding at the back. You know, there's no sketches or anything. Like the last page is the comic. You know, so it's 121 pages of story.
Got a bit of room to breathe. It's much less cramped. I still feel like Mort Stephen Briggs' script is a bit at fault with some of the pacing. There's a few wordless, a few panels towards the front that could have gone entirely without dialogue, because that's very much a part of the difference between comics and prose. Whereas there's a lot of wordless panels towards the end of the book that maybe feel to be too many. So some problems with pacing. My biggest problem is it drawing away of focus from Carrot. I feel the original was much more Carrot's story, whereas this is clearly Vimes' story. And it's a bit too much pulling away from his journey. So maybe less Vimes, more Carrot.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, as you say. Definitely a challenge of a direct challenge of adapting it from prose to a visual medium, because for sure the novel is Vimes as we see him through Carrot's eyes, and it's very difficult to give that kind of POV in a graphic novel, especially with a narrative that's already quite dense. That there's already a lot of other stuff going on, even outside of that Carrot Vimes dynamic. So yeah, I totally see where you're coming from on that front. It would be interesting to see it a bit more from Carrot's POV, and I wonder, you know, just going to hold up, or Andy will probably flash this up in the edit, but on the cover, you know, Carrot is kind of the largest presence in the cover art, because he's the largest guy, but he's there in the middle. It's framed in quite in such a way that it keeps his height, keeps his build, you know, kind of obvious. Like he's the largest presence for sure there, but he's not the largest presence in the story as we read it in the way that he potentially is in the prose.
And much like Higgins on Mort, a really iconic cover, and there's a lovely little inside reproduction of it as a silhouette. But going back to I mentioned James Higgins and the color. I really love the color palette choices throughout this book. It's fittingly Frank Morpork. It's filthy. It's grimy. Occasional flourishes of vibrant colors for panels with a more exclamatory thing, a cartoony thing. Good medium palettes for the scenes from suburbia, like Lady Sybil's place.
Yeah, like 120. Just worth saying if you haven't. You know, I know this is maybe a book that isn't on every Discworld fan's radar if you don't read comics, or just for whatever reason you haven't got around to it. Like, it's 121 pages of full color. Like, it's, you know, the production value is high across the board, isn't it?
Yeah, and Higgins' work really zaps. It's never obscure, really. You generally know what's going on with Higgins, and he is able to be both functional and have an element of character to his art, an element of eccentricity, which the best underground cartoonists always have.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, there's a certain impressionistic quality to some of the character designs. You know, Terry is so vivid in his descriptions that you can't help but picture these slightly exaggerated characters in your mind sometimes. I'm thinking about people like Once and Dibbler, and their character designs have that sort of comic exaggeration, you know, with the say, whether it's actually just coincidentally they both happen to have big noses like that. I'm sure there are other ways in visual arts to communicate character other than the size of their nose. I'm not an artist. I wouldn't know.
I've got in my notes, I've got underlined, what is Nobby? Higgins nailed it.
Yeah, that's, I mean, one of the biggest challenges for any visual adaptation of Discworld is the unknowability of Nobby Nobbs, and the running joke about the question mark over whether he's human or not, and how far into that conceit do you buy? You know, how grotesque do you make his character design in a way that he still has to be able to function within the story? Like, you know.
There's a lovely panel actually I put up on screen now that I've tucked away of Nobby and Errol side by side.
Yeah.
Same height and yeah.
That's one of the opportunities, I suppose, of the medium, where you can have those kind of visual comparisons or contrasting images. But yeah, the fact that Nobby is essentially a human swamp dragon for the purposes of this story is quite a fun little addition. You know, it's great. A lot of the time when we talk about adaptations, you know, especially online and fandoms and stuff like that, usually when we're talking about adaptations, we're talking about what's been changed, what's been taken away. So it's really, really nice to be able to land on something that's been added, you know, like what opportunities present themselves in a new medium to add something to the story. So yeah, little things like that I think go a long way in something like this. I don't know. I mean, we're going to break down the story, aren't we? We're going to do our usual.
Any other first thoughts? Like when did you? So I just read it last month because you love me your copy.
Of course,
when did you first read it?
Good question. Probably should have looked that up before before jumping into the podcast. When we talked about Mort, I think I might have mentioned. I remember reading that in the library. Like I got that from the library of our school. However, the school library did not have a copy of Guards, which is disappointing. So I guess I probably would have read the Mort comic around the time that this came out, around 99 or 2000. I'm fairly certain I got it in Forbidden Planet in Belfast. Probably you will know the timeline of this better than me. I'm sure whenever Forbidden Planet became Forbidden Planet and moved, nobody outside Belfast cares about this one, moved from behind Castle Court to Ann Street and became sort of quite a big, slightly sexier comic book store instead of like a kind of upstairs behind a wasteland kind of place.
Sure, the timing. So as PJ no doubt knows, it was previously known as a Talisman.
That's
One
right.
of the big pools in Forbidden Planet was the guy in charge of the comics. The assistant manager was Mal Coney, who's written a number of comics himself, from
That's right, yeah.
and the Darkness, and very knowledgeable, very literary minded, very friendly guy. And they were around in Smithfield Market for quite a few years. So
That's right, yeah.
I'm not exactly sure when they moved to Ann Street or to becoming a Forbidden Planet store.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, which is so. Yeah, I'm sure if you're listening to a podcast about a graphic novel, you're aware that Forbidden Planet is an international comic book store chain. So yeah, we got one in Belfast. I guess around this time, right, around the early 2000s, anyway, maybe slightly later. So that was kind of a big deal, and it was a big deal that it was Mal from Talisman who was going to be in charge of it and stuff like that. So I have a feeling I bought this there. I can't say for sure that I did, but let's pretend that I did for the sake of the story, because it's good, and it's good to shout out our local comic book shops and stuff like that. So yeah, I remember certainly the first time I saw it thinking that the design of the cover was so cool.
Yeah.
Like how exactly right the character designs were, because everybody who's heard this podcast knows that I have a bit of a whinge about the Jack Kirby covers any chance that I get. But when I first saw
Jack Kirby covers,
Jack, imagine, yeah, God, that there's some slander for you for a big name. Josh, sorry, Jack.
Higgins is good. I love the middle of grime on the cover, the little sort of electrolyte neon and Terry's name.
Yeah, the reference to the neon sign, you know, the magic that the stolen neon sign that they use is great. It does it almost gives it a mild steampunk sort of vibe. You know, you get the obvious fantasy characters, both of them with the the neon lighting. But Vimes in particular, I mean, they're all great, but Vimes in particular just looks exactly how I think I've always seen Vimes on the cover. And, you know, he's holding an arrow like a rifle or like a flamethrower. He looks extremely badass. Carrot looks extremely badass. Colon and Knobs are doing their very best. Colon's got like a version of an old school Metropolitan Police helmet on, and he's got the truncheon, so you know that it's not just like a sword and sandals kind of thing. These are coppers; they're not just adventurers or whatever. So yeah, I think it's great as covers go. Like, you see that if you're a Pratchett fan, especially if you're a Guards fan, you see that sitting on the shelf. Like, how could you not? How could you not buy it? I think it probably. I was going to say it probably cost me an arm and a leg, but according to the back cover, it only cost me £9.99, which is a bargain.
And then, I mean, just preempting going into the dividing books, the first couple of pages have an art style that's very different from everything else. It's a very big, epic, painterly thing. I don't know if Lovecraftian is a word, but you've got Great Atuin and the Dragon King. And just glorious pieces of work.
Yeah, and I mean that's pretty faithful as far as adaptations go. You know, that little vignette at the start of the book about where the dragons went and where they are, and like you say, it's this kind of conjures a very Lovecraftian image where every space in between the dragon is another dragon, and you're like, oh right. as a first page that I have to draw for this comic book that I'm adapting, it's this big kind of almost unseeable, unknowable kind of abstract mindscape, and Graham just goes, okay, just jumps in. As you say, that stylistically it is a little bit different.
Yeah,
I think
I was criticising lack of wordless panels there for pacing, and it is a problem, but also a benefit in the way Higgins just decides to keep moving, keep throwing everything at the story and keep it constantly moving forward, keeping it busy. So there is no quiet moment. And actually that's a Guard story, isn't it? There is no quiet moment.
Yeah, I mean, true. I think if you were to compare it page by page, like you say, there's lots of stuff missing, lots of Carrot's letters, lots of Carrot's POV is missing, but it is a book, it's a novel that's packed full of story, it's packed full of plot. So yeah, he's got his work cut out for him. I think there must be some contractual thing, or maybe it's just some unspoken rule. I've never seen or read a Discworld adaptation that doesn't begin with an image of Great Atuin. Like it's almost just like it's so important that we see the turtle and we see the world and we see the elephants before we get stuck into the story, and like it's not really. It doesn't. I don't think it really does. You know, you could put that on the back cover and just be like, "There's the world," if you were looking to save a page. But all that being said, it is an extremely badass picture of Discworld. Like the first page of the book is very, very cool.
Well, let's dive into the first of 4 mini synopses for
by all means.
this.
Yeah, but we'll not probably over ring the plot on this one since we've done it before, but it'll be a good touchstone to flick through the section. So you take it away.
Even among the elucidated Brethern, everyone should know the stones with the holes in them are magical. It takes one man to arrest the head of the Thieves Guild. The new corporal plays charades in a report on a missing ook, and a man's remains are burned against a wall in the shades. Vimes pays a visit to Lady Ramkin, and they witness a dragon in the sky. So a lot of setup, quite competent. I mentioned issues with Carrot, but I feel his intro is really, really, really good. Really, lots of graphic detail in there, loads of pen lines, a real feel of texture to it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's not to say that Carrot isn't a well set up character in this adaptation. He definitely is, and that setup is front loaded because that's, I guess, where it happens in the book. So we have this kind of, I guess it starts on page 4, 5, 6, 7, and at the bottom of page 7, he's kind of off to the big city. But it's worth saying off the bat, like there's no, well, tell me if I'm wrong here, Andy. Actually, I don't think there are any, or there's maybe one or two splash pages. There's certainly no double splash pages in this book.
Well,
Is
there's
there?
no doubles. There's at least two splash pages. Well, I suppose if you count the opening sequence, there's maybe about four.
Yeah, because the first two pages are kind of one each, I guess. Right, okay. Well, actually, page 2 and 3, there's technically a double splash page there, I suppose, but it also has 4 paragraphs of text on it.
There's a few I want to talk about actually, and certainly at least one that is a half page, but feels like a splash page.
Yeah. The reason I bring that up, I guess, is just that we get a few pages of Carrot's backstory here, but they're relatively dense in terms of like panel count. There's like 5 or 6 panels minimum per page, which, considering introducing a whole bunch of new characters, a new world, you've got humans and dwarfs together, there's a lot of story to kind of get through here. But
yeah, I would guess that's quite a demand upon Higgins, but one he manages to pull off and make it seem fairly effortless. I mean, 6 panels a page is about the recommended dosage, but he's regularly putting in 10 there with
yeah. But I was gonna say it's not the densest part of the book by any means, but it's not. Well, I guess after those, I guess the thing for me is that like the initial splash pages are of the entire world on some elephants on a turtle, which is about as macro a view as you can get of this world. Then you've got a bunch of dragons all on top of each other, but then you're straight in to the inside of a mountain. So you don't have maybe a half page of a mountain, of Copperhead Mountain that you might if you were coming into this world. And, you're straight in media res with a dwarf right up in your face with a gem in his hand, and that's quite a big crash zoom down from space, essentially, into the inside of a mountain. It's like a huge perspective shift as you turn that page. And I don't know what I have to say about that, because I don't know enough about making comics, but like I find that there's something interesting in that in terms of just the economy of storytelling that's maybe required to pull this off,
Yeah.
I love that, yeah. As a first, sorry, I'll shut up in a second and let you talk about this because you know about it. But that's the first panel that has like sort of creatures, like relatable sentient beings in it, is the dwarfs. And then the second panel has Carrot. He looks kind of like a Tintin character, just kind of walks in. He's like, hello. It's visual comedy straight off the bat. I think is really well delivered.
Yeah, it's a really good 3-page introduction. They're a really good example of pacing, and you can see the one where it goes a bit over the top is the elucidated Brethern bit, where it's quite indulgent in the whole Python-esque of Pratchett, that whole chorus, and really works well with how we associate comic books with that fantasy trapping. Although I feel it goes on too long for a book of 122 pages. I think that first Brethern sequence is maybe about 6 pages long.
Yeah, that is fair. I would say, I guess, that it's so important in terms of kicking off the A story, but also that thing that's maybe a bit trickier to do in a visual medium that you can get away with more in prose, where the head, what title does he give himself, the Grand Master or whatever of the elucidated Brethern, turns out to be once, and there's a bit of a twist there, so you have to give him enough time on the page for that twist to feel okay, for that to feel warranted. Because if he's not there, if he's only there for like a page, and then all of us, as in his guise as the Grand Master, and then you've got this big twist reveal, and you're like, oh, it was me all along. And you're like, wait, but who the fuck? Like, so you have to kind of establish both roles to a degree so that you can have that reveal. But it's much easier to do on the page of a novel than it is to do on the page of a comic book, especially because you got to hide the guy's face the whole time as well.
I know
So
what you're saying because I was struggling as I was going through to remember the name of this character who was the patrician's second and seemed to be taking all the patrician's calls and then placing him with the Brethern. So I didn't really succeed for me, but just going the act of going back over this in a different medium reminds us just how um, it enhances the signal of the original, and the fact they got these magical stones from CMOT Dibbler, stuff like that. There's also a ton of wee references I picked up on that I
oh yeah.
probably didn't the first time around. So a lot of mentions among the brethren of Tubal de Malachite, who I'm wondering, was he a relative of Albert's?
Oh yeah, because he's certainly a powerful wizard. That much is established. So yeah, that there could be a connection there. Certainly, gosh, that's not something I've ever really picked on. Probably say I don't. I've only really reread the Death books for the podcast, whereas I've read this a bunch.
Also, Carrot references Miss Garlic, the witch, who I've seen from the witch's novels.
Yeah, is that a retcon though? Is that in the novel, or is
No.
that would be worth checking?
Leave us go to your own copies of the novels and leave us a note and comment.
Guards.
No, don't you do it.
I've just left to go do it now. I must know. Yeah, yeah, good question. Yeah, stuff like that. I mean, as we talked about first time round, it's Guards is where the Discworld starts to feel a bit grubbier and a bit more real and a bit more lived in. So, and anything to enhance that in the adaptation, I think is all to the good for sure.
You also get the relevel a number of jokes. The recurring waiting bird thing. Is a dragon or a wailing bird?
Yeah.
And Carrot's first day on the job results in 87 arrests.
Yeah, the visuals of that. Again, Bogus from the Thieves Guild is good character design, and I guess the librarian. I think if we're talking about visuals, the playing charades with the librarian, like that's something that really comes alive on the page for sure. As good a mental image as Terry paints, I think Higgins nails that in how he does it. Like the librarian. I don't know. I'd be interested in your takes. I don't feel like I've kind of the language for the character design, but he's big, but he's not too big. He's threatening, but he's still silly. He's very expressive. The charades sequence is where all that's kind of put front and center.
Yeah,
And
not barely. It's furry though.
yeah, it really, 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 really works for me. Because again, that's one of those things where like, I imagine everybody has their own sort of mental image in terms of how that works, in terms of how an orangutan is a librarian and how he functions in this society, what he looks like, how he actually moves, how he interacts with people. There is kind of, in the books, there's sort of gaps there that need filled in that you actually have to put on the page if you're going to draw him, if you're going to sort of visualize his interactions with people. And I think it works really well.
Some of my visual favorites from this section are Sybil and her whole aviator look and the stuff around the dragon sanctuary. And just throughout the book as well, there's a lot of painstaking detail going into drawing Ankh-Morpork and just making it look like a completely realized piece. A sort of old-timey European city kind of thing. I really love those panels.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got, I mean, I think everybody sort of probably pictures some version of old London for Ankh-Morpork, and that's totally on display here. Really works. Just looking at a panel here on page 22, it's just a small one in the middle of the page, but it's got the kind of, the multi-level houses right by the river, the brick bridges and everything, and the shades, the alleyways of the shades, all that stuff. Also, actually, just on this page is the Patrician, who I think that they've also nailed the design for here. Very much the kind of Alan Rickman kind of model of veterinary that I think a lot of people for years were kind of picturing, you know. Again, it was probably the number one fan casting for veterinary was for sure Alan Rickman until he unfortunately passed, and you can see that in the design of the character here for sure. Yeah, just on this now I'm just flicking through, just reading the book again. But yeah, so much good librarian stuff. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for the charades sequence. And I'm not even reading, just looking at it, just looking at the visuals again. It's really making me laugh, you know, because Carrot gets so into it as well. And he would, you know, he always wants to be so helpful. Yeah, it's great. So that's another couple of things that I think are kind of added to, that are elevated a little bit in this adaptation. So yeah, moving on, section 2. Dibbler Distribution has a white-hot fire sale. The dragon destroys the watch house roof. Vimes fends off a baying mob while wearing a pink nightie. City celebrates the new king, who makes the dragon go away. It returns, and the elucidated brethren meet death. We're getting to where things get pretty real, getting some big kind of blockbuster visuals, I guess, and in terms of dragons doing what dragons do, burning down cities and squishing adventurers and things of that nature.
There's one absolutely does it for me, and that's the brochure for Dibbler's White Hot Fire Sale. Comics do this sort of stuff so well. I guess it relates to sort of advertisements they pulled in back in the bygone eras of the 1950s and newspapers prior to that, but it's built for satire.
Yeah, nothing beats a kind of a text gag like that. Is how I would think about them from the kind of film and TV side of things. Like when I started out, my first jobs was in props and in set dressing, and we would always try to get stuff like that in. If we had to make posters or flyers, we'd always be trying to squeeze in extra gags and stuff. So yeah, I've got loads of time for that. Although, I mean, to be fair, I think, to give obviously Terry his due, I think that flyer exists word for word pretty much in the text, but there's something special about seeing it as it would exist.
Yeah, isn't it? Is there an anti-dragon detector? Or...
Yeah. It's just a stick. It's like, how do you know when you find the dragon's caught fire?
Another little mention: Veterinary's Terrier.
Yeah, I don't. That's not a retcon, because that's the gag for sure on the page, because it's set up. Does he have a daughter? It's like, no, he's got a dog that he quite likes. Although dog's not in sorcery, is it?
Yeah, Waffles is introduced in sorcery.
In sorcery, of course. Yeah. So, and then he's going to come back and make a couple of more, impact on various stories. So yeah, we don't get to see him. Do we get to see Waffles actually anywhere in this?
It's just a bit of a conversation about what type of dog a terrier.
Yeah.
Would you like? Well, one of the blockbuster ones I would really want to talk about is the attack on the watch house, which is dynamite. Just the guards just exploding from the rooftop. It just looks so. I mean, it's what Higgins is doing, that kinesis. Pow. So yeah.
Yeah. It's tremendous. I think it's in this section as well, or maybe it's just before, because you're calling out all these panels, great panels, left and right, and I'm just flicking. Yeah, there's one in particular, the only one that I called out. I think we meant to talk about this. It's on page 52, and it's when the watch are discussing the death of their comrade, who like Vimes was kind of drinking to right at the start of the book. And there's just this panel in the middle. It's like of page 52, where it seems to be like Vimes standing in a rain of blood. like screaming. It's like something out of a Kurosawa movie. It's like it goes way, way harder than it needs to, and it's much, much more brutal than any of the images that I think Terry's trying to conjure of that moment in the book. So it's an interesting choice, I would say.
I'm trying to remember if we ever learn what. Oh yeah, so Gaskin is chasing somebody around a corner, which Nobby or Colon says you should never do. Is chase someone
Yeah,
and
he chased him too fast. You gotta do it. Go chase him slow for the look of it. He chased him too fast, and then whatever happened is apparently quite nasty.
because at this stage there's the attitude amongst the guard you can't keep your head down a bit.
Yeah.
And that's very a Colon Nobby sort of thing. It's only when Carrot comes aboard that Vimes ditches the bottle, becomes more proactive himself. I guess kind of backing up Carrot because Carrot's gonna run after the guy too fast.
Well, in that, yes, I think like just because you mentioned it in the synopsis there, I think part of that transformation for Vimes is kind of meeting Lady Sybil and that whole sequence where he defends Sybil's house from the mob. You know, Carrot's not there for that.
Yeah.
That's all Vimes, right? And the visuals of that in the comic are spectacular because Vimes is in the pink nightie.
Well, yes, I
Throughout.
want to absolutely talk about that beautiful shot. He's got an arrow gun,
Yeah.
which is another try. Top action hero moment. That's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I get why they didn't put him in the pink nightie on the cover. I think that might have been a step too far, but it means that it's a real treat when you get there, when you see it in the interior artwork, you know.
Yeah, I think you could probably say both. It feels to me like both Carrot and Sybil are agitators for this new reformed Vimes.
Yeah, very, very much so. I just want to point out before we move on from that, another joke that is enhanced, I think, in the visual, which is Vimes rocks up at the door with Errol looking quite threatening, but he's in the nightgown, and one of the crowd says, "Night shift, is it?" Because he's wearing a shift.
Yeah.
And because you've got the line and the image in the same panel, it just lands that bit harder. It just gets a bigger laugh from me anyway. But I'm a man of simple pleasures for sure. Because then he says that, and then Errol goes off, and again, sorry, right? Yes, go read it. It's great. But yeah, just little things like that. You know, Terry's description is so visual. He paints such a vivid picture, but then to see it realized as well as that. It does. It just adds that little something. All that stuff's there. I mean, for Higgins, that must be a joy. That whole sequence, that must be a joy to adapt because the visual gags. He doesn't have to come up with any visual gags himself necessarily to enhance this. They're all kind of there on the page. He just has to figure out how to make them work, which is, I'm sure, is no mean feat as somebody who's never written a comic book. But yeah, you nailed it.
And this graphic novel came out kind of worried about sort of a right order for what have we just done? Truth and another book.
Thief of Time.
Thief of Time.
Yeah.
So Guards came out at that point as a graphic novel. So there's certain things Stephen Briggs could have ignored because they don't come back into the continuity again. I'm thinking of Carrot's first girlfriend, Reet.
Oh yeah.
Who's never mentioned again. She's in there, but he's chosen to include those. And I quite like that. I think there's something to be said for nostalgia and reliving those same little beats and just enjoying them another time round in a different form.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, yeah, there's a deep respect for the material here for sure. And yeah, like, would you have missed Reet? I don't know, but like you say, so much of the Carrot POV stuff has been stripped back already just to give him a girlfriend, and he doesn't realize his girlfriend is perhaps or was of ill repute potentially. is still a good guy, you know. So yeah, it's interesting, yeah, because my script editor hat would be like, what could we trim here? And if we're making a conscious decision to move away from Carrot's POV and make it more Vimes POV, then you should just lean into that. But I can't imagine there's too many people reading this comic who haven't read the book. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for the most part. There's one thing I'll be looking forward with interest. So, as Pratchett, actually, it's not quite. I suppose Pratchett will have worked with Briggs at some level in overseeing this, and I'm wondering if revisiting guards, and like he'll have revisited previous books for other adaptations. I'm wondering how that will affect his storytelling going forward. Will that, I mean, Night Watch is coming up in a few books' time. We'll find out then, or I'll find out then. Most of you already know. You know, if there's going to be a resonance and knock on from the revisit of guards.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually, because, going right back to the start of guards, and without spoiling anything, the sort of men-at-arms, feet of clay, to an extent, Jingo, they're quite self-contained, episodic entrance, I guess, in that series, and you can kind of see the version, maybe, of the Guard series that is a bit like CSI Ankh-Morpork, which is what Terry's vision for the TV adaptation always was. But then, again, withholding as many spoilers as possible, but then when you get to Night Watch, it becomes a lot more character-driven, I guess, without wanting to say more. That becomes a little bit more introspective in terms of the characters. And I wonder, does that come from revisiting their origin in this? Revisiting those characters with a fresh set of eyes and just realizing that there's depth there to be mined that perhaps wasn't mined in the slightly more episodic entrance in that series. That's something I hadn't considered before. It's a very keen observation, sir.
Okay. Do you know what hasn't changed? Dibbler sausages.
Oh God, the visual. I mean,
you said to me when we talked in the cafe there, exactly how you pictured them looking, just as gross and ganky. And
I'm trying to find the page. I haven't eaten a sausage since I reread this, whatever that was, like a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I just can't get it out of my head. It's got joints in it. You know what I mean? It's like I would if this hadn't worked. I mean, this is a difficult book, I would imagine, to adapt. I think a lot of time and effort and money probably went into adapting this book. And if it had all been for nothing, as long as that image of Dibbler sausage was nailed, I'd say it would have been a worthy enterprise. I don't think there's nothing sums up what Ankh-Morpork is, like the character of Ankh-Morpork, more than a Dibbler sausage, and Higgins absolutely nailed what it looks like. I think it's even got a little hair sticking out of it. It's perfect.
I've also got in big caps underlined cityscapes. Particularly, there's pages and pages of wonderful character art in the foreground as the city celebrates the dragon allegedly being dispensed with.
Of course.
For those who are a bit late to mention, but those who are watching this over YouTube or Spotify, they've got tons of clips that transposed over that, and it's tempting just to keep going and putting loads of that on screen. But heck, you can read it for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's well worth picking up. I assume it's still in print. Discworld Emporium is usually a good sort of first stop for all this stuff if it's not there.
And they'll send you a lovely envelope with lots of little stickers, like Ankh-Morpork stamps, and you might get a freebie or two on the inside.
It's very cool.
Also pizza in block caps, where the elucidated Brethern. It's quite enjoyable in the scene. I did that.
Just on the pizza now, he's doing that thing. It's very well observed. He's got, I'm just going to count them actually. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, He's got 6 pizzas, but then crucially, he's got the bags underneath. He's holding the pizzas flat, but he's like dangling a bag of, I guess, for me, it would always be dough balls, but your mileage may vary. But he's got that, like, really well observed, awkward man carrying
Dibbler combo on.
Oh, maybe, yeah. Or where did, is it, does the pizza restaurant get a shout out in this? Does it get a name? I can't know. I don't think it does, actually. It's usually Hagrid gets a shout out in situations like this, usually. But I would say Hagrid probably does pizza as well. You know, it's like one of those.
Up your copy game. We were talking about splash pages earlier, and there's a one in this, a very creepy page of the dragon. Or is this the one with the? No, it's maybe in the next section. I
think I know where you're at there.
Scene of the dragon hanging down.
It's on page. There's on page 69.
A wonderful multi-panel page of the dragon beginning to intimidate once with like a telepathic link, and it really lets Higgins really just goes to town on like I don't know, is it surrealist sort of lots of a futurist thing, almost lots of angles and really quite intense feeling scenes. I think this is actually Once and the Dragon. All those pages are just phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to read out the next synopsis and we'll dive into it?
The king is dead. Long live the dragon. The guild's heads are brought into line. Gold and a virgin. You can't reason with a dragon. Errol joins the watch, but Vimes is sacked following a tense showdown, and he joins a patrician in the dungeons.
Stuff, yeah. So that kind of sort of starts off roughly at the section we were just talking about, which is where the guild heads come to the palace, and they're great. Like the designs are great. You know, the head of we've already met Bogus, but head of the Assassin's Guild is suitably mustachioed and black hatted, and then they come face to face with Once, who looks like shit. I mean, that's definitely the description more or less in the book. But so you've got that great splash page you were just talking about, which is dominated in the top 2/3 by the dragon hanging from the ceiling over the hoard of gold. And yeah, it's a very, very striking image. I remember being a very striking scene in prose, but like you said, if there has to be a splash page in this comic, it's got to be this, right?
You get lots of jagged speech balloons to emphasize that. Extended close-ups of the predator. A number of sequences just play out really well.
So I guess one thing, I'm just skipping ahead over that, the whole kind of sit down with the guilds and Once speaking for the dragon. When you read it in the book, in the novel, you have that sense. Obviously, the dragon's not directly participated in that meeting, but obviously he looms large over it figuratively. In the comic, he looms large over it literally. And there's like just that. He's just visually in each panel. There's like a little sense of the dragon curled up in 8 or 9 of the 14 panels across the next 2 pages. You know, so you're just like that constant visual storytelling. I guess like the dragon is who you're speaking to here. You're not speaking to Once, you know.
We get a lot of stuff in the build up to that as well. A lot of busyness in the city, coming up to that fear factor. We get 2 great showdowns between Vimes and Once. I mean, Once is very rodent-like. Because here Higgins is really good with physical expression. So you get Once on one side, and then you get Vimes. He's gesticulating, he's butch, he's half cinema action hero and half classic gumshoe. And yeah, I really like the contrast Higgins draws between those two.
Yeah, the outfit, like the character design. Well, Vimes gets a few sort of costume changes throughout. So his character design kind of shifts, and yeah, in this section he's like got this big thick sort of turtleneck on, and yeah, we've sort of put you in mind of like a 40s or 50s Hollywood kind of leading man maybe in terms of the costume. Definitely more gumshoe than military in terms of the action hero, what sort of style of action hero we're going for. And yeah, it's one I suppose when I was reading the book, like you always sort of picture Vimes in uniform because it's kind of baked onto him almost. That's kind of what we're told about him. He's kind of a lifer in terms of being in the Watch. Obviously, sequences where he's wearing a nightie aside, you're picturing him in uniform. But no, it's very explicit in both versions of the story that he has been expelled from the Watch. At this point, he's not technically a watchman, but I guess I had it in my head probably reading the novel that he's still wearing some version of his uniform, or he's still wearing his uniform but not the badge. But he's not, and I wonder actually.
I mean, this feeds into.
But does Sybil give him these clothes? Actually, these aren't his clothes. Is that what it is? Does Sybil provide these clothes? I have a feeling that she might, but just in terms of when you have a sort of slightly static mental image of a character, and then it's easy to kind of gloss over those details and you're reading the prose, but when you see them on the page, it gives that a different sense of them because he's no longer in uniform.
So that actually finds a home, that thread, in the scene between Vimes and a patrician in the dungeon, which I felt worked really well. And of course, you've got that wonderful punchline about the door bolts are. But one of the problems I have skipping ahead with the ending, it feels like there's a lot of translation. You don't really get the full Vimes or Carrot showdown with the patrician at the end. And I think the closest we get with Vimes and the patrician is this scene in the dungeon, which is well realized. It conveys a necessary volume of the original.
Yes, true. I know you don't have the luxury of a long denouement, I suppose, in the comic, but that's where the patrician usually shines, where he like comes in at the end and throws a nice big cold bucket of postmodernism over everything. I'm just trying to track this costume change for
one review of this novel when it was released, and somebody criticized the patrician's soliloquies, saying that they risk this sort of politicking risks making the Discworld books unfunny. Should I go and Google that author and name them and shame them?
Yes, I think so, because it's such the opposite. When Ankh-Morpork becomes veterinary city, when we get a full unflinching look at how that society functions through him in terms of the guilds and all the kind of absurdity that comes with that, which is just a direct reflection of the absurdity of our lives, of modern life. How can you not see that for the elevated satire that it is? Like if you don't want that, what do you want from these books? I don't understand.
Yes, John Clute. Right, are you still writing for Interzone, John Clute?
Oh, Interzone? No way. Oh my goodness, I used to subscribe to Interzone. I think they've tried to bring Interzone back recently, haven't they? I think they've tried to relaunch it. I got my first ever rejection letter from Interzone.
I don't know. He's 84 now.
Well, okay. I feel like we probably shouldn't pile on too hard to him. He's totally entitled to his opinion.
Now he's a colleague of Ros Cavaney, who I've had a few interactions with, but then again, Ros is one of those people I think everyone knows.
Well, yes, we'll not besmirch anybody by the associations that they keep.
Interzone's still going, apparently. So
I think it was recently brought back. I think it was maybe I was subscribing to the hard copy, I think up until it was discontinued the last time. But I think it's recently come back. Looks nice. Some of the new covers and stuff look quite nice. Yeah. I have some old Interzones lying around. Maybe not out on display here, but it's a good magazine. End of stay.
One of the scenes I really liked, the guards refusing to turn on Vimes when one orders him to. He might
The
not be
design,
wearing uniform, but he's still the Watch through and through. It's in his DNA, and they kind of recognize it. I like that sort of services, loyalty theme and stories.
yeah, for sure. I
Particularly when
think,
it's a positive rather than a negative. Yeah.
yeah, Vimes is such a good embodiment of that. I do have a slight question, let's say, over the design of those guards, the palace guards. You know, the ones who show up to kind of take Lady Sybil, and then the ones who square off against Vimes. Like, they're very un-Discworld-y character designs. Like, they're wearing like caps and waistcoats. Like, they're like museum security guards rather than like fantasy palace guards, which I'd always envisioned these guys being like in the fancy trousers and like the gold ornamental stuff. Like, so it's one of the few visualizations in this novel that I don't really vibe with, I guess,
I guess they haven't had royalty in a while, and do you really think the patrician's going to pay for their outfits? Isn't it likely they're going to have to go and see Dibbler?
It's a good point. I guess, like, yeah, if you think about them as veterinaries guards rather than palace guards, that's maybe where it starts to make a bit more sense. They're a bit less pompous. They're a bit more kind of low key. They're a bit more bureaucratic. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I mean, I can totally see. Obviously, a discussion was had about this between all these extremely talented men who made this comic.
Not. Maybe it is an anomaly or a badly thought logic. It didn't stick out to me, and I'm trying to think why. Because as regulars know, I'm right about everything.
Of course.
But
And I mean, to be fair, I think your explanation there was a good one. You gotta think about this palace as being veterinary's domain, not the dragon's domain, not a king's domain. It's the domain of an arch bureaucrat.
maybe
And
the costume is some other veterinary side mission.
and it is. And listen, I tell you what, I guess at the end of the day, this is a comic book, and visuals are king. The image is king in this medium, and Vimes staring these guys down is funny. It's he's like this big rectangle of a guy with this big turtleneck on, like ready to throw fists, and they look like museum security guards, and that is probably a better visual contrast than what I was originally picturing, perhaps. So yeah, you got to go with the professionals on this one. Shall I read the last one? There we go, part 4. Sam versus Sybil, Errol versus the big bastard, and Wants versus Gravity. A petty wage increase and a kitchen utensil? I suppose a dartboard would be out of the question. Sybil thinks Vimes needs looking after, and Carrot shows off his birthmark. It all comes together in a nice little bit.
Yeah, so one of the things I noticed again and again and again in this section, that Higgins really has a flair for Ankh-Morpork buildings, whether that funny looking structure or the old tiny European build. And by and large, the clothing is well realized. And yeah, I really loved looking at that. I mean, his character work is very, very underground cartoony, but the buildings and the transportation, there's a functionality that he has a consistency in that, which I really just loved taking in.
Yeah, agreed. Just looking at some of those pages now, sort of towards the end, page 96, 97, where, as you say, there's lots of really good images of the city. We get to see the tower get immolated, which is a great panel. And then there's some guards in this section. I can't let this go. I don't know why. But there's some guards here who are a bit more of the like Spanish conquistador style with like proper kind of medieval fantasy style helmets and uniforms. And they were the guys I was probably picturing I thought they would be the same guys in the palace, probably. But I'll leave that. I'll let it go. There's room for all interpretations here, and obviously, Higgins has gone out of his way to make both those designs and incorporate them purposefully where he wants to incorporate them. So he has got his reasons for doing that. And I guess in this bit, Vimes is back out on the street, so when he's fighting guys who feel a bit more kind of street level, they're wearing armor, they've got axes and stuff, so he gets to get properly stuck in and have a good proper Barney with him to rescue Sybil.
And I mentioned there's a few wordless panels in this section of the book that I'm not so fond of, but I'll temper that with saying Briggs retains a lot of the character in Terry speak, and bearing in mind the length of the source material, that's quite a feat.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, just looking at it here, there's quite a few panels, obviously, between the dragons, I guess, between Errol and the big dragon, were by necessity, I suppose. They're text free, but it's maybe one of those instances where, like, the fact that the book doesn't have a strong POV character, we don't really get much in the way of character. We get some of Terry's voice, we get some of Terry's narration here and there, but we don't really get much, if any, in the way of Vimes' internal monologue or Carrot's the way we do in the book. And maybe those sequences might have been enhanced by that, maybe just to have a little bit of Vimes POV over the top, just to kind of give us, just to round it out a little bit, maybe. Is that what you're thinking? Would that sort of help those sequences for you, or would you just approach them completely differently?
I think, when you're going without dialogue, it is when you're slowing stuff down a bit, or you're going for a calmer tone, right? So that sort of stuff needs to be towards the beginning of the book, when it's lazy and it's slow, and maybe there's more scenes of sleeping in the pub or sleeping at the watch house, or just speaking to that sort of pre-Carrot watch or pre-Sybil watch. Where
here's something I just noticed.
More sort of low gear.
Yeah, here's a question for you. Something I just noticed. I've read this many, many times. There's no sound effects.
I was not spotted.
Oh, hold on. There's maybe one panel with sound effects on page 20, which is when Carrot goes into the bar and beats everybody up. Which is great. That's fine. But if there's a fight between two dragons, do you not want sound effects there? Like, how would that kind of affect the pacing for you, do you think? If you had a bit more of that old school kind of bam and whiff and...
I mean, what I am thinking is Graham does some wonderful visual depictions of both the dragon themselves and the shape, and also the sort of the sky around them, the shape of the flames, all that sort of stuff. So
was that kind of thing, was that in vogue or not in vogue in comics at that time, I guess?
Yes.
So would it have been seen as quaint to have like a lot of sound effects in a comic like this, or would it?
It probably would have been a thing that was done.
So it's a very, very conscious decision, obviously, not to do that then, which is interesting. I wonder, is he wary of stepping on Terry's prose too much? Of getting in the way of a master, I guess, of the craft. Is that? But I could see there's definitely room in some sequences where it might have brought a little bit of dynamicism.
Yeah,
perhaps. But
yeah, I mean, if you think of the scenes between the dragon and Once, and just that real sort of abandonment to art styles, if there was a way of feeding that sort of approach into the dragon fight, I would say that would have been an amazing sight.
I think that would have required a step further away from the source material, potentially, than Higgins is comfortable with. Like, now we're so used to it, to kind of reimaginings being the kind of the watchword for a good adaptation. Nobody really wants to see an adaptation anymore. That's kind of a one for one retelling, whereas this is extremely faithful to the source material.
Yeah, I felt the Dragon King and the Errol matchup felt a little bit sort of tacked on, just plugged in.
Yeah, I
It
think
didn't really.
it's hard. It is hard to dramatize on the page. I mean, it's hard to dramatize without any kind of internal monologue, without any nailed on point of view, without sound effects, without. He set himself a big challenge there, and it's not a failure by any means, but
No, I've
there
got a
are
list
problems.
here of
Yeah,
things I like about Briggs and Higgins
go
stuff in
on.
this last bit. The patrician soliloquy to Vimes, which is, yeah, it's there totally. Nobby's appalling negotiating skills.
Yeah,
Vimes and Sybil's clumsy flirtations have a sparkle to them,
true.
and the men chatting in the pub after, which adds to the naturalistic dialogue. It's very much something you can imagine, you can hear.
Yes, you're in the scene with them. You know, they're very large in the panel. Look at a page 120 here, and it's as close as colon as we ever get, and he's got a nice big packet of crisps right there. You know, so it feels very lived in. Yeah, it feels very ground level, very grounded indeed. Yeah, we've talked about this probably quite a few times. Terry Pratchett writes a pub scene like nobody else. He writes people drinking like nobody else, and it just to flesh that out, to see the colors and to get kind of up close and personal visually with those characters is a real treat. It's a real moment of catharsis, I guess, after the kind of yeah. So even though I just said there isn't much of a denouement to the story, he what room he has for that he uses, or I keep saying he, like I'm giving Graham Higgins all the credits here. I mean, I'm sure Stephen Briggs, obviously, and that's not like me. I always want to give the writer the most credit, so should shout out Briggs as well. I'm sure how they handled this bit, because they obviously weren't going to be able to do the whole epilogue, or the how they handled this section would, I'm sure, have been a lot of work and a lot of redrafting and a lot of back and forward. So credit to everybody
Apparently,
involved for
the
that.
mission scene in the original is just phenomenal. One of the really enjoyable points. As a standalone, this book doesn't need it as such. But I would have liked it to be there. But then again, I would have liked this to be 250 pages. But we can't always get what we want.
Yeah, there is maybe yeah, just a slight limitation to the format. If you're going to release these things as standalone graphic novels rather than a limited series or whatever, then that's what you got to do. And it's a shame because when you reread it, I've sort of felt this rereading the novel for the podcast, that like these are the books where Terry really leans into serialized storytelling. You know, you can see this, you can see single issues of this comic book all having really strong endings, all getting people to come out and buy the next issue because that's kind of storytelling he's leaning into.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Sybil in this book. I think Higgins has nailed her just right. You really get that sparkle and magnetism from her. I think she's a really attractive character.
Agreed. Yeah. So good then, was it? What did you think?
Yeah. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like we talk about Discworld so much as a series of books because it's a tremendous series of books and it's quite intimidating almost as a series of books. It's 42 novel length tomes. So when you come to these adaptations, it's easy to sort of think of them as just these like little asides, you know, these kind of trivial kind of sideshows to the main event. But I mean, as somebody who works in a visual, as both of us, I guess, you know, are creatives in visual mediums, I think we hopefully get something out of these, you know, and I think more people would maybe if they check them out. I don't feel like it's something I see people talking about that much in the fandom, you know, like everybody's kind of aware of them and they're there, but like there's not a lot of spontaneous conversation happening around these adaptations, I don't think, or maybe
Yeah, I've been looking around to pick fights with people over this contention of 41 Discworld novels, but
yeah.
there's, I mean, the collected short stories has got to be a 42, and there's so many. I think hardcore Discworld fans will have read all those map books, or a substantial amount of them, and cookbooks, and
We don't talk about Science of Discworld, though. We don't talk about that.
oh, let's see, PJ.
I absolutely refusing right here and now. But you might be able to talk me around. You may be able to talk me around.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, we don't have a lot of time on this earth. We probably shouldn't go back and read long form books when there's so much else, but we can go back and spend a little time with favorites, where there's been an adaptation to another medium, particularly when it's great like this one is.
Yeah, for sure. What I find endlessly fascinating and why I keep maybe coming back. I pick this book up quite often. This comic book, I mean, this graphic novel. I pick it up quite often. Something that really interests me about Discworld, and the more time I spend thinking about narrative and storytelling and how that all kind of works, the more I come back to it, because everybody will say it's almost a truism about Pratchett that like his work is hard to adapt. It's all the humor is in the narration. There's quite a lot of meta humor in it as well. But this is a guy who he was commissioning, like he was pushing these graphic novel adaptations. He was pushing the video games. So there's like, 2 or 3 Discworld video games as well. There's a couple of animated adaptations. There's a couple of 2 or 3 4 maybe live action adaptations. So, and then there's all the stories about, Discworld and Disney and how that never happened. So,
And Stephen Briggs's many plays, which seem to be almost as many as there were novels.
and yes, not that it's kind of stage plays. It's also like the kind of tension there between how unadaptable everybody seems to think that Pratchett is versus how prolific he was almost in terms of trying to get his work into visual mediums.
As a manager for his properties and as a promoter out on the campaign trail.
Yeah, but I find that tension quite interesting from like a guy who writes these books that are all the comedy comes from the narration, comes from the meta humor, but like somebody who obviously has a huge love of visual storytelling. Like he's got a huge love of video games, he's got a huge love of film and TV, graphic novels, stage plays, all that feeds into it. But the fact that there doesn't feel like there's a definitive adaptation. There's no one Discworld adaptation where people are like, that's the one. That's if you had to get somebody into Discworld, like everybody still says you give them guards, or you give them Mort, you give them one of the books. Nobody says to get into Discworld you should pick up a graphic novel, or you should watch a TV show, or you should watch the cartoons. Like surely that's what those things are for. So I don't know. I just find that all super interesting. The fact there's like a lot of tension there in terms of how people perceive Discworld versus like maybe how Terry did. He wanted it to be accessible. He wanted it to be out in the world in all these different mediums. And I think we should celebrate that a little bit more.
It sure is good comics. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we will, and I promise we will, get into doing some of the other visual mediums soon. It would be good to do. I don't know. I've got a real soft spot for the Soul Music cartoon. I would like to do that. And there's a couple I've never seen. Just because like I've still never seen Going Postal as an adaptation. And obviously we would have to wait quite a while to get there because I think we would need to do the book first. So I'll try and keep my powder dry on that one. Video games, would love to get into that if we could figure out how to make that work. So let us know, if there's any particular adaptation that you guys are into that you would like to see us tackle. As long as it doesn't spoil things for Andy, we'll try and get into it. as well.
Absolutely.
As long as
Reach
you want
out.
to. Yeah.
We're here for the audience interaction. It's a big part of why I do this.
Indeed. So any bright spots? I feel like the whole thing in general is one fairly bright spot,
It's
but if
kind of hard. Like Vimes in the pink nightie, the dragon hanging down from the roof. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned a dozen of them and forgotten a dozen.
it really stands to the quality of this book. I mean, I've just got one word: sausage. That's my bright spot right there.
Sausage. Can I say a thank you to my patrons?
Love that we just quickly moved on from the last official word of the podcast being sausage, but yes, by all means.
We'll come back to sausage. Um, Sonia Andre, Richard Hwang, Munyaka Yemrick, Andrew Bolster, Donald Fallon, Alex Seaman, Rodriguez, Shell, Dave Crummy, Matt Saunders, Andrew Gallagher, Alan Royal, Benjamin Stone, Arslan Hyder Ali, and particularly Ian Lawther, who also goes halfers on the Zoom bill, which allows us to do that. And because I haven't put my half in a while, Ian's gone out tonight and enjoyed himself. So we've had to cut this together from bits. But
No
you wouldn't have
disrespect.
noticed if I hadn't told you that.
I mean, you could cut that out too. Put it in the extras. Yeah, nice one. Thanks everybody for all the support as per usual. In terms of plugs, bit quiet on my end, busy with the research, but very keen to give our colleagues at Last Dance a shout out ahead of their appearance at the British Podcasting Awards. We're rooting for you guys. If you haven't checked out Last Dance, fantasy fiction podcast, locally produced by an indie team here in Belfast. If you're into that sort of things, I hesitate to say Game of Thrones because like it is a bit gritty like Game of Thrones, but like it's got its own thing going on. It's very much got its own identity. I don't want to give too much away. Definitely do check that out, and hopefully they're on to bigger and better things. They're currently kickstarting their second series, I believe. So check them out. Give them a bit of love. It's a really, really good indie series.
I have, of course, a number of books on the go. Another Time, which you've seen mentioned here frequently. Occupied, which is essentially the Elusive Brethern set up a protest camp. And Coastlines After Dark. I've no idea how to describe this in a Discworld context. Put you on the spot, PJ?
Oh, good. I mean, if you like this kind of level of satire, then this is for you. It's just it's pointed at 80s television instead of turn of the century fantasy. I think this is.
There we go. Does for 80s television what moving pictures does for Hollywood.
Boom, done. Yeah.
I've also got some really great stuff on my YouTube video. There's a essay on sociological fiction, on new politics and new stories that I really like you to check out. I put a lot of work into it. I'm bringing back the Press Gang Readers Commentaries. First one just gone out over Patreon. Oh yeah, there's a couple of omnibus reviews of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, seasons 3 and 4. So yeah, it's like 4 hours of content plus gone out over the last month.
That's great, man. You've been working hard. I'm not going to do my full kind of plugs, but I'm aware that Halloween is fast approaching again. So if The Devil's Own hopefully is still up there somewhere on BBC Sounds and you're into a bit of spookiness in the run up to Halloween, you want a documentary that deals with some real life devil worshipping, then check that out on BBC Sounds. The Devil's Own
And if
with
you
John.
can't get it to BBC Sounds, give it a Google. It might be elsewhere. Note spelling devils as divils with an I instead of an E.
Whose idea was
Devils-
that? Not mine. Just actually genuinely not mine. But it speaks a little to the comedy, a little bit to the kind of unique perspective that the documentary is made from. So yeah, worth a bit of a making it slightly harder to Google. I think it kind of sells it a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's always nice to touch base on these things. I'm curious now. This was probably quite a good little lead-in to our next book, which is the illustrated Last Hero.
Last Hero, yeah. This landed on my bookshelf recently from Gavin. and I haven't dared open a page of it or even look at the cover, so I'm quite excited to
Interested?
see
Yeah.
what Murray and Paul Kidby have in store.
Yeah. So finally, we some big discussions to be had about Paul Kidby. I don't know if I've read this or not. I'll be interested to see if it jogs my memory. We'll get into the kind of whys and wherefores as to the reasoning behind that when we speak about it properly.
I'm pretty sure I know who the next character is, whether I guessed or I was told. So I'm looking forward to catching up with them.
Oh, I think you'll be able to prove yourself correct very, very, very quickly. Okay. So yes, looking forward to that. Nice to dip back into the visual mediums. Comic books, illustrated. Feels like, Discworld's become this very mature franchise at this point of the series. So very, very excited for Andy to experience where it goes from here.
Thank you for joining me and PJ on our journey. If you want to chat over the web, we're a bit distant, but we're like always up for it. At Discworld GNU on Blue Sky or Facebook.
That's us. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Can you say you've read Discworld? You already read this one. You can't use your catchphrase. Or maybe you can. I've seen some Discworld. I don't know. What do you want to do?
I've read another Discworld. Yeah.
Another version of the same Discworld. Go away. Go play outside. Bye-bye.
Charlie?
Yeah.
Just need you to name an animal
Yeah.
that we eat but doesn't eat us.
Doesn't eat us. That's easy. A dragon.
Charlie, do you eat dragon?
No, I don't eat dragon because it's not a meal for peasants. It's a meal for kings, and I'm sort of a common man. But they don't eat us. It's a misconception. They actually eat gold and treasure. That's why they're always sitting on a big pile of it.
Bad answer.
Bad answer.
Bad answer.
Bad answer.
That's a bad answer. Okay, show me dragon!